From the City of Angels off the Pacific Ocean, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to Coast AM. Also welcome a couple new affiliates joining the Coast to Coast AM family, WCBX AM in Martinsville, Virginia. Hello, and WBUV FM in Gulfport, Mississippi. Thanks for joining us. Open lines this hour, and next hour, we're going out of the country to talk with former Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and then a special program with Richard C. Hoagland from the EnterpriseMission.com. And Richard's got a handful of secrets for us. Here's some of the news of the day. Israel has approved plans to widen its ground offensive against Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. The country's security cabinet also rejected calls for a ceasefire until an international peacekeeping force able to intervene with force, preferably headed by NATO, was in place. A participant with Israel said Israel's airstrikes in Lebanon would resume in full force after the 48-hour suspension expires in about another day. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad told the Syrian military to raise its readiness, pledging not to abandon support for Lebanese resistance against Israel. In an annual address on the anniversary of the foundation of the Syrian Arab Army, Assad called on the military to work on more preparedness and raise readiness of all units. Wonder what all that means. Diplomats in Damascus say the Syrian army has been on alert since the Israeli onslaught on Lebanon began on July 12th after Hezbollah fighters captured 2 Israeli soldiers in a cross-border operation. The UN Security Council passed a resolution giving Iran now until August 31st to suspend uranium enrichment or face the threat of economic and diplomatic sanctions. How many times do they do this? Iran immediately rejected the council action, saying it would only make negotiations more difficult concerning a package of incentives offered in June for it to suspend enrichment. Don't look for Iran to stop anything. Shanghai in China has constructed a massive underground bunker complex capable of sheltering 200,000 people from a nuclear attack. The million-square-foot complex connects to shopping centers, office buildings, apartment buildings, and the subway system via miles of tunnels. The newspaper said the complex has water, electricity, lighting, ventilation, and protective doors, and can support life for as long as 2 weeks. Cuba's President Fidel Castro is not doing too well tonight, temporarily signing over his presidential powers to his younger brother Raul after undergoing intestinal surgery. In the letter, Castro, who's 80, said he had suffered gastrointestinal bleeding, which he blamed on the stress of recent public appearances in Argentina and Cuba. Due to the operation, Castro said he was forced to rest for several weeks. Castro said he was giving his 75-year-old brother power because Cuba was under the threat from U.S. government. That's his quote. In Framingham, Massachusetts, a Brazilian man was arrested on charges of practicing medicine without a license after a woman died during a liposuction procedure performed in the basement of a home. Luis Carlos Ribeiro, arraigned in district court on following the death of a 23-year-old woman. And now fingerprints are replacing credit cards at some retail stores. Get ready for this. The name of the company is called Pay by Touch. 2,100 stores so far in 44 states are clients of Pay by Touch, a company that lets customers use biometric identification, body-based measurements unique to each person instead of cash or a credit card to pay their bills. For critics, biometrics straddles the line between privacy rights and identity security on one side and the selling out of personal data on the other. But Pay by Touch and its clients and customers say biometrics is the cutting edge of convenience and consumer technology. The COO of the company, John Moore, says paying by credit card is antiquated. And he said the company is ready to go with all this all around the country. People who enroll in Pay by Touch have 2 fingerprints, usually those of both forefingers, scanned into a computer that records the patterns of ridges, swirls that make each person's print unique. The fingerprint information is stored in a top security IBM data center, they say, to prevent a data leak. Pay by Touch hires ethical hackers, they say, to try to break into the system. Open lines for you this hour, west of the Rockies, 800-618-8255. East of the Rockies, 800-825-5033. The first-time caller line, that is ready to go at 818-501-4721. And that very special wild card line, 818-501-4109. I'm George Norrie, and the week is underway on Coast to Coast AM. Well, Buzz Aldrin right around the corner at the top of the hour. Then Richard C. Hoagland comes in. I got to tell you, I have wanted to interview Buzz Aldrin all my life. Never had a chance, never had the opportunity. So this is going to be a first for me as well. Be like a giddy kid. West of the Rockies, let's go to you first. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, how's it going?
It is going well. Where are you calling from?
I am calling from Modesto, California.
Well, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I have a question for you, George. I've been a long-time listener. And I really, about a week ago, you had Linda, I forget her name.
Linda Moulton Howe. She's our roaming reporter.
Yes, I was stuck to that radio for a long time, even on commercials. But I wanted to get your opinion about it.
Well, I think it's a great story. I think Linda does a heck of a job investigating in just about anything she covers for us. And I've got to tell you, it's a very compelling story. As a matter of fact, I got an email from the individual that she interviewed that she had heard on the program before, and they made contact, and he thanked us, and he said, he may be in jeopardy a little bit career-wise where he lives. People are beginning to know him, but he didn't care. He wanted to say what he knew. I think it's a great story. Great story with the fact that there was a flight surgeon in Dayton, Ohio, who apparently had witnessed an autopsy of an alien.
Right.
It's absolutely staggering.
And at the end, I don't know if I heard it or I didn't get it. What happened to him? And after this, I'm going to go ahead and hang up the phone because there's other people who are trying to get in.
Well, now, when you say what happened to him, to the person who knew about the flight surgeon?
Right.
He simply just passed on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, he didn't go under any kind of strange circumstances. Thanks for the call. First time caller line, you're on the air. Where are you?
I'm in Hartford, Connecticut, George, and I want to thank you for taking my call. I'm a long-time listener. I wanted to talk a little bit about the C-SPAN conference over the weekend.
Okay.
And, you've been a great hero of mine because you're one of the few radio hosts who have had the guts to talk about 9/11, to have people like Alex Jones on your show.
Well, and we're not done either.
Yeah, and what I wanted to talk about was, and alert your callers, over the weekend, they ran a conference of highly academic people, including Webster Tarpley, Professor Jim Fetzer, Webster Tarpley, and BYU physicist Stephen Jones. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be re-airing this Tuesday at 6:15. So that's everybody tomorrow. Don't watch Seinfeld. Don't watch Everybody Loves Raymond. Check this out for yourself. Some of the points they were raising are the controlled demolition of the towers, suggesting that there were bombs planted into buildings, that they fell at near free-fall speed, that there was World Trade Center 7, a building not hit by a plane, and it collapsed at free-fall speed at 5 p.m. They talk about the U.S. military training the hijackers at U.S. military bases, people like Mohammed Atta, who were part of the Able Danger program. They talked about Osama bin Laden meeting with the CIA 3 months before 9/11. They talked about the stand-down of the NORAD air defense. And this is all going to be on tomorrow at 6:15 on C-SPAN. So, George, I wanted to know if you had seen this conference and if you think that the 9/11 movement is getting more mainstream. Do you think that as we get on television, with this thing airing tomorrow at 6:15 on C-SPAN, do you think more people will be able to wake up to this? Do you think that the globalists are starting to get threatened? Do you think Bush Cheney are starting to get worried?
No, I don't. Well, let's go back just a little bit. I don't think Bush Cheney are starting to get worried, but I do believe what is happening here is more and more people are becoming aware that whatever happened on that horrible day on 9/11, there may be a bigger picture here. And again, I keep going back to this. There's no question in my mind that Osama bin Laden and his group of cronies were part of this. The big question is who helped finance them? Who helped push this? I don't believe that they could have conceived this without some help. I don't know who helped them, but I do believe somebody did. And to me, there's a much broader conspiracy here. And you are correct when you say say that a lot of these academicians, is that correct, how you say that? I think that's right, that they are getting on this bandwagon. They're investigating. They're sticking their necks out. They're sticking their careers out to say that there's something broader here. This is a Illuminati one world government scenario. This is not, and don't pick on the United States government. This is a group of people who are in the United States, people who are in Germany, people in France, in England. They're worldwide people who I believe have wanted to manipulate and bring down the United States for their own reasons. And I think that's part of what happened with 9/11. And you're seeing more and more of that. And then you have to say who benefits, who profits. You know, you don't have to be a genius to figure it out. You just look at who's making all the money from all this turmoil that's going on right now. I mean, are you profiting? No. Am I? No. But somebody is. And then you have to ask yourself, why? The C-SPAN program is well worth watching for everyone who has an opportunity to see it. Let's go to the phones again. Wildcard line, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
First-time caller, too. I just wanted to ask you a question. It's got a little story attached to it, but within this past year, I was at my friend's house, and we were hanging out, and one of my friends just happened to say, hey, it's 11/11, make a wish. And I kind of thought about what she said for a second, and I silently thought to myself, you know, what could I really wish for that wouldn't be selfish? So I just sat there and thought about it for a few seconds, and I said, all right, every time I see 11/11, I'll wish for peace, world peace, and then never thought anything of it ever again. Then I started realizing I started to see 11/11, but only at the clock. Like, I just would happen to look at either the AM or PM and just see 11/11. It's been going on probably the past year to the point where, like, there's touch screens at work that kind of come up, and if you touch it, it goes blank, and, like, it'll appear right when it's 11/11. It'll just pop up, and so then I'm driving down the street one day, and I'm telling my friend, and, like, a few seconds later, this guy calls up, and he starts talking to you about 11/11, and I kind of caught a little bit of it, but I wanted to find out if you could just explain to me a little bit more about. You said you had a show, or you kind of. I
talked to Glynis McCants, who is our numbers lady, we call her, and she tells me that 11/11 is a good thing. It's a moment of enlightenment. The fact that one sees it so often just really means good things. If not only to that individual who sees these series of numbers, but also to episodes as well. I think the fact that you're seeing it and I'm seeing it, so many other thousands of people are seeing this, I think that's a good thing. I think something good is going to come out of all this mess that we're going through right now. I really do. Okay, thanks. Keep listening. Keep looking. 11/11, it's everywhere. Next up, east of the Rockies. You're on the air. Hi there.
Hey, George.
Yes, sir.
I'm so glad to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
I've been wanting to talk to you for a long time. I told your screener that I did get to talk to Art Saturday night.
Well, good for you. Now, you're only allowed once a month, but the fact that you got in, I'm not going to hang up on you now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Just a few things. I really enjoy your program. I'm looking forward to your program tonight with Richard. I'm an amateur astronomer, an amateur radio operator. And one of the things I talked to Art about was him getting back on the air. And the time difference between here and Manila.
Yeah, because like today, now it's Monday night, Tuesday morning. It's well into Tuesday in Manila.
So I don't know how he's going to work his schedule out. He said he had gotten the authorization to put a 200-foot tower on top of the building that he lives in. So I don't know how he pulled that off.
He may make that one of the tallest buildings in Manila.
Right. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to try to hook up with him there. But
cool.
Looking forward to hearing Richard tonight.
And don't forget Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut.
And Buzz. And golly, I just feel so lucky I got through to Art and to you.
Well,
all
hey,
in one weekend.
You're chosen. What can I say?
I don't know, but I feel like I am, too.
All right. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you being part of the program. Next up, first-time caller line. You're up on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello.
Yeah.
George, this is Tony from Omaha.
Hello, Tony.
Hi. I was calling because I was wondering if you checked out Prime Time on Wednesday. They were talking about medical mysteries.
No, I have not.
And one of the mysteries that caught my eye, they were talking about were people sleepwalking, and they commit suicide while they were sleepwalking.
Oh, my God.
And they were, they said that this tennis player that they interviewed, he said that while he was sleeping, he said that he saw like a shadow in his room, and it scared him that so much that he jumped out the window of his hotel.
That's frightening.
And he survived. And I was wondering, maybe, sometimes when people talk about seeing shadow people, if that's what if that's what's going on, or
man, I've never heard of that before. There's a case last week of a young 19-year-old female chess player from England who jumped or pushed or fell out of a building, and she died. And they said she was very depressed, and also they were saying she might have been sleepwalking. So it's almost exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they said that some of these people aren't depressed at all. They said that even gun owners actually have shot themselves while they were sleepwalking.
That's dangerous. How did they stop that?
I have no idea. I just was, because, it's a medical mystery, so they don't 100% know for sure.
Yeah, Tommy was telling me about a couple that was daring each other, and I guess he was daring her to stab him, and so she did, and he died, I think. Something bizarre. I mean, how crazy does it get? What is going on this planet? Wild card line, your turn. Hi there.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Where might you be?
My name's Jeff, and I'm calling from Kansas.
Yeah.
Well, George, I was wanting to tell you a story. Back in 1985, when I was a senior in high school, I was moved in with my sister, and we were playing with the Ouija board one evening, and for some reason, when me and her would get on it, it would really move. Well, we got to asking the questions. We asked if there was a spirit present, and it spelled out David. We asked David with the goodbye at the bottom of the board meant, what it was for, and it spelled out it's for my mother. We then asked it, why is it for your mother? And it spelled out clearly. I still remember this to the day, so she could be by my side. And we asked it once again, why do you want her by your side? And it started to spell out, so she can meet SATA. And when it got to the A, before it got to the N, my sister threw it off the table, and she instructed me to burn it. And I had two of my friends with me. And so we took it outside, and we tried to burn it, and it wouldn't catch on fire.
I hear a lot of stories that this thing just doesn't burn. Now, was your mother alive at the time?
It was my sister.
Your sister? No, but I mean, where it said goodbye, was it about your mother?
No, it was for the spirit David. It said it was for his mother.
Oh, his mother. Okay.
So she could be by his side.
Man,
and then we asked it, why do you want her by your side? And so it spelled out, so she can meet. And it started to spell SATA, and that's when my sister threw it off the table.
Keep away from Ouija boards.
Well, check this out. I'm not done. So we couldn't catch it on fire. Are you there?
Yeah.
We could not catch it on fire, so we went inside. My sister gave me some fingernail polish remover, and we took it back out in the yard, in the middle of her yard. We poured that on there and commenced to lighten it. And when we lit this thing, these screams.
Screams?
I'm shaking right now. And this happened in 1985. These screams from, it's like they were all around us.
So it started to burn, I guess, right?
Yo, it lit up. And then the next thing you know, you hear these wicked screams like almost like cats.
It's almost like you were releasing whatever spirits were in these Ouija boards. I was talking to my publisher this weekend, and he was telling me of a Ouija board story, and he would call it the Ouija board story from hell. I mean, I have not heard anybody talking about a great Ouija board story. By the way, I spent the entire day today, and I've got to do it again tomorrow, recording the book, Worker in the Light, on audio, for those of you who want it on audio tape, or for those of you who are blind and you've asked for this book. And let me tell you, that is pretty darn intense. 7 hours of straight reading. And I've got to do it again tomorrow. But the people listen to the program at this production company here in Los Angeles, and they are just amazed by the knowledge that you have whenever you call the show. I mean, they are just absolutely amazed. And they've listened to talk shows all around the country. And they say, this audience is absolutely brilliant, and I agree. I'll be back in a moment. We'll continue this entire hour with open lines, and then for the first half of next hour, former Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin joins us, and then Richard C. Hoagland for the rest of the program right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, I got an email tonight from the folks at After Dark who are working on the After Dark CD, and they said, George, we only have 200 left. That's it. And rather than just put them on a shelf, just make them available. We'll give them out until they're gone, and that shall be it. The After Dark double CD, it is free, complimentary to you when you subscribe to the After Dark newsletter. They may go tonight, tomorrow, the next day, who knows, but 200 are left. That is it. I'll give you a daily count until they're all gone. You can order the After Dark newsletter and take advantage of the free double CD by calling 1-888-727-5505. That's 1-888-727-5505, or go online during coasttocoastam.com. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Hey, by the way, did you know that Buzz Aldrin's mother's maiden name, was Moon? Talk about strange things. Back to the phones we go. Wildcard line, welcome to Coast. You're on the air. Hi there.
Hi, George. It's Mike and Andy listening on 1070
Hey,
WIBC.
Mike, sure thing. How are you?
I'm doing fine, George. I had a quick comment, a question, and a request.
All right.
I wrote it down so I'd make it quick. But you're always talking about the meteors coming close, and I just want to let you know, George, I read something where they said in the next 6 months we're supposed to have the closest hit we've ever had. And also, too, a question for Buzz. If you would ask him what his scariest moment was, his first scariest moment in space, you know. And also, too, I had a request. I was wondering if the next couple hours you could play that Sounds of Hell for a friend of mine that's never listened to the show.
Oh, I can't play it tonight because of the interviews. It'll scare the heck out of Buzz Aldrin. Don't want to do that. But maybe on one of my Friday nights we'll do it again for you.
Hey, great. We'll be listening. And thank you, George. I appreciate it. Tell Buzz we appreciate everything he's done for our country.
Sure thing. Very nice of you. Let's go to our first-time caller line. You're on Coast to Coast. It's your turn. Hi there.
Hi, George.
Yeah, hi.
My name's Mike from Columbus, Ohio.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, I just have a personal question to ask you, and I just wanted your opinion.
All right, well, I'll try to help you as long as it's not personal about me. I don't care.
No, it's my father back in May 24th, went in the hospital and had triple bypass surgery.
Okay.
He came through the surgery itself real good, but then after that he started having complications.
All right.
And, well, July 9th, he passed away.
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And but right before he passed away, I told him, he knew I was there. He was squeezing my hand and everything. And I told him, I said, if you're going through a lot of pain and everything, do you feel like you want to go and be with God? I said, just do it and don't worry about me because I won't, hold it against you or be mad. And I think, personally, I think it's the best thing I could do for him. But I was just wondering, do you feel that maybe he's somewhere, like, around us, our family, like in the house? And if so, why hasn't he, I've heard, like, spirits do try to contact you. Why hasn't he,
Well, if he's not around, Mike, probably he has moved on to the other side. He is, once they do that, once they go into the light, they go, and that's a good thing. I mean, really, I know how you might miss him and want him to be around, but, the best thing for a spirit slash a soul is to move on. And to me, it sounds like that's what he's done already.
Okay. I was just maybe...
And that's a good thing, believe me.
Yeah, and
I can't tell you how many spirits can't find the light.
I was just personally kind of hoping that maybe he might be around watching over us for a while.
Well, maybe he was around for a little bit. And, I always believe that even though they go into the light, I mean, that feeling is still there. It's not like they're gone forever. But, I mean, unlike a ghostly type apparition that kind of hangs around a house and things like that, it doesn't sound like that's what's happened with him.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you, George.
Okay, Mike. You take care of yourself. East of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hello, George. This is Jerry from Chattanooga.
Hey, Jerry.
Hi. Got a question for you.
Yeah.
My stepdaughter sees, I guess, what you would call shadow people.
Okay.
It's always around me. I never see them, and I was wondering, what exactly is a shadow person?
Well, let's see what she's describing. But what we hear, shadow people are these images of shadows, basically, of people who you see primarily on walls, of course, but some people are beginning to see shadow people not on walls, which is even more eerie, I believe.
Right. Well, that's what's scaring me, because the other night, probably, I'd say 2 weeks ago, my car wouldn't start. It started, I put a new battery in it, and it started. I mean, I have never had any problems out of it. One night, my stepdaughter, and my wife had left, and I was on my way to work. I went out there, and the car's completely dead. Will not turn over. I get a jump, and they're back. They're coming back, and they pull up next to the car that's jumping me, and my stepdaughter gets out, says, "There's somebody standing beside you." And
she's not trying to freak you out, is she?
No.
So she sees this all the time, but always around you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not all the time, he said, It's not all the time.
How old is the stepdaughter?
She's 14 now.
14 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean, whenever she says she sees this thing, is something wrong happening to you?
Well, not always. Like the other night, like I said, the car broke down. Thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you?
I'm at work.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And
what do you do?
I'm assistant manager at a gas station.
Oh, so you're in the window?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, that's I just like to paint a picture of what you're doing. Now I can have this image of you behind the window on the phone with people trying to pay, and you're not paying any attention to them.
Right. I'm more east of Chattanooga. It's called East Ridge. It's just right outside Chattanooga. But our windows, it's a pretty safe little town. We don't have a window. It's just an open counter.
Now, does she see these shadow people, though, around you at work, at the house?
No, just at the house. And it's only been a couple of times. It's not a constant thing she sees. But the one that really freaked me out was when the car wouldn't start. I've never had a problem with that car.
What year is it?
It's a 91.
Wow, it's 15 years old.
Yeah, I understand that. But it's in very good shape. Okay, so it's just that okay, here's what she said. It was completely black, and it was standing beside me with its hands on its waist. And she described it as a guy. And that's just, I was just wondering, is that a shadow person? Or
well, it's a shadow something. Okay. I would like to get a little bit more information to see how often this happens other than a couple times.
Right, okay.
I wouldn't worry too much about it yet, other than I would just be a little more aware of your surroundings.
Okay.
Just play it safe.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being part of the program. Next up, let us go to our west of the Rockies line. Welcome to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, this is Rick out in Houston, Texas.
Hey, Rick. How are you?
Oh, not bad. Good morning, Mr. Norrie.
Yes, sir.
I was just calling in. I was a military pilot back in Europe. When I moved here, I became a commercial pilot. And, you know, as a pilot, one sees quite a bit of odd things from time to time.
That's what I hear.
It's true. It really is. Much like if you ask a policeman about the full moon, people say it's a myth, it's not, yeah? Well, pilots see weird things. It happens, yeah? Back home, of course, we were told to report everything that we see that was out of the ordinary, and we, of course, did, yeah? This country, they tell you the same thing, but they don't want to hear it, yeah? And, you know, it builds up.
And the only one who really knows about it are the other pilots, because
right, and they're afraid to say anything as well.
Jobs come
I'm
first.
Rather anonymous here, yes.
What airline, by the way? Can you say?
If I do, they'll likely track me down. I have a rather distinctive voice.
Yes, you do, and we don't want anything to happen to you.
Right. In any case, you know, of course, I'm home now, but I know you were talking about that with the last fella.
So you're still flying, though?
Oh, yes, and I'd like to continue to do so.
Well, if I ever hear a pilot's voice who sounds like you, I'll know it's you.
Well, possibly, yes. There are a couple of us that work for there. That
Anyway, what kind of weird things have you seen?
Well, I've seen what obviously were clouds that just didn't look that way, but I've also seen structured objects that were clearly metallic. Possibly aircraft. Of course, I've never seen aircraft make 90-degree turns.
And your co-pilots see this as well?
Oh, yes. We often take video cameras with us into the cockpit, just so that we can sit around with the other pilots and show what we can never talk about.
So do we have some good video here?
From time to time. Often, of course, filming through an aircraft window simply is not a good way to film.
No, that's true. But if you have any kind of images at all, that's pretty startling stuff.
We do. The frightening part, though, is a lot of times when we try to give these out, we do as a collective effort, yes?
Sure.
And other people will put things in there in good faith, yes, and we accept it, and we find out later that they are utter and complete fakes, yes, which discredits the entire set.
So how do we know?
Exactly. A lot of times by examining what's on the tapes, you can tell which ones are obvious frauds. We've had real trouble lately as pilots here in the southern United States, and it's easy to check, yeah. We've had a lot of layoffs suddenly, and most of these are people that have been coming forward with things. And I just thought that was something that might be worthy of notice.
So they kind of get singled out before others, I guess.
Yeah, and not generally rehired by other people, yes.
The word gets out. So how does one get a hold of some of this video, if you were me?
Quietly, I would assume, yes.
Yes? Could you give me some of it?
That is entirely possible. It's one of the reasons I called.
Okay, you don't...
I've got probably 6 hours of videotape, none of which is more than about 3-4 minutes long. Very rarely do we see anything that lasts much longer than that.
You don't have it on a computer that you can send it to us, do you?
I actually have some stills, but again...
well, why don't you do that? I'm going to put you on hold.
Let me see if I can't find something that's not going to identify who I was.
Well, I'll tell you what then. Just remember my email address. Here's my email address, all right? You ready? George at coasttocoastam.com. You got it?
The one on your website?
Yep.
Yes. I've actually got that open as we speak.
Okay, just send it right to me. I'll get it. I'll send it to Lex. We'll do a little analysis, and if it's worthy, we're not worthy. If it's worthy, we'll put it up on the coasttocoastam.com website. Next up, let's go to our wild card line, where some of them have been holding for a while. You're on the air. Hi there.
Hi, George. This is Ron. I live in Brookings, Oregon.
Hi, Ron. Now, where is that?
It's about 25 minutes from the California border at Crescent City. It's right on the
Okay, I know where Crescent City is. Okay, great.
Gorgeous place. I called for... I'm 59 years old, and I spent 2 years in Vietnam. And I had an instance in Vietnam, and I've always wondered if there's other Vietnam veterans out there, especially that flew. I was a door gunner in a helicopter gunship for 2 years with the 3rd and 17th Air Cavalry. And we had an instance when we were called out to, we were on standby. It was late at night, and a big mess of crap started happening at a place called Firebase, Kentucky, which was by the Cambodian border and out by Cu Chi. And we were flying out to support the fire base because they were getting hit real hard.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, as we were flying out, the pilot, Longworth, I've never told anybody much about this, but the pilot, Longworth, brought up to me and the crew chief that, look off to the side, what is that? And there was a light out there that was following us. And as we were heading towards Firebase, Kentucky, which was about 30 minutes from where we were at Redcatcher, that was our home base, which was in Benoit. And as we're going, it started getting closer and closer, and it was it was bright and oblong, and this thing came up and around us and went all around us, and it lit the helicopter up, and we were just like, oh my, Longworth was having a hard time with all this, and then it backed off, and it stayed, I would say, about a mile away from us, and we went in and did what we had to do. We went on our gun runs. There was a battle going on down below us, and we had to run, do our gun runs and everything, and this thing stayed around and watched what we did. And as we were leaving, we got a call from Benoit Air Force Base, which was about 10 miles from where we were supposed to go back to our home base, and they told us to divert there. And we went back to Benoit Air Force Base, and the next thing we knew, there was air police out there. They escorted us all to these buildings, and there was a general in there, Air Force general, and there was an Army general, because I was in the Army at the time, 3rd of the 17th Air Cavalry, and there was some plainclothes people, and they separated all of us, and they talked to us about what we had seen and everything, and then they flat-ass told us, you never saw nothing, you don't say anything, or you won't go home.
And I heard this weekend another story of a UFO case in Vietnam where both sides that were shooting at each other stopped, both sides, to watch this UFO fly overhead. And, I mean, it was almost that they were mesmerized by what was going on. Apparently, a lot of UFO cases in Vietnam during that war. A lot of them. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. Next up, let's go to our next wild card line. You're on Coast to Coast. It's your turn. A couple minutes to go. Hi there.
Hey, George, how you doing today?
Great, thanks.
All righty. My question is, or my statement should be, for Mr. Aldrin. Me, along with so many other Americans and military people, are sick to death of people like Bart Siebel, Ralph Renee, and all these other clowns out there saying...
we never went, right?
Yeah, exactly. Now, for Mr. Aldrin, Mr. Armstrong, and all the other 10, there's only 9 moonwalkers still alive. But when the men got back in the limb, they had to stand flat-footed and jump straight up the ladder. I've seen the footage where Neil Armstrong jumped up the ladder, and he landed on the 3rd step, which is about 4.5 feet above the limb pad. The greatest vertical leaps recorded in history were only 42 and 44 inches, not even 4 feet. Yet these men, with spacesuits weighing over 300 pounds, jumped straight up about 4.5 feet in the air. Air Jordan couldn't even do that. And I would like for Mr. Aldrin, since he has the connections to NASA, if they can get all of the moon ladder jumping footage from all the cameras running.
Oh, yeah, but you're going to hear with Richard C. Hoagland right after Buzz all the great videotapes, and probably this stuff. It's missing. It's gone. Nobody knows where it is. It's a major story.
Okay. But even then, if it's missing, still those men had to jump up. Now, for Mr. Siebel and those guys, hey, it's time to call your bluff. Get the best jumpers you can find, and if they cannot duplicate Neil Armstrong's one giant leap, then it's time for them to shut up and go earn an honest living, like cleaning septic tanks or something, instead of insulting these men's techniques.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, I am not going to even ask him if he went to the moon, because I think that's a slap in his face. Not even going to do that.
Oh, yeah, personally, no disrespect to Mr. Aldrin, but I don't think he hit Bart Siebel hard enough. I think Mr. Siebel needs a good old-fashioned blanket party.
I remember that case, too, when Sibrel tried to chase Buzz with a Bible and called him all kinds of names, and Buzz said, hey, enough is enough, and he took a little swing at him, and Buzz felt, you know what, he wasn't getting out of my face. He was badgering me, and he did what he had to do. And no charges were ever levied in that particular case. Okay, in a moment, Buzz Aldrin is out of the country, so we're going to connect with him for... It was September 12th, 1962. John Kennedy was our president. He was speaking at Rice University. He was speaking about going to the moon.
There is no strife, no prejudice, no national conflict in outer space as yet. Its hazards are hostile to us all. Its conquest deserves the best of all mankind, and its opportunity for peaceful cooperation may never come again. But why, some say, the moon? Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why, 35 years ago, fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
And less than 7 years later, we did go to the moon. And one of those who walked on the moon is our guest in a moment, Buzz Aldrin on Coast to Coast AM. Buzz Aldrin was educated at West Point, graduating with honors in 1951, third in his class. Buzz flew Sabre jets in 66 combat missions in the Korean conflict. Returning to his education, he earned a doctorate in astronautics from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Manned Space Rendezvous. In 1963, Buzz was selected by NASA as one of the early astronauts. He has logged 450 hours of flying time, 29 of which were in space. And then on July 20th, 1969, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong made their historic Apollo 11 moonwalk, thus becoming the first two humans to set foot on another world. This unprecedented heroic endeavor was witnessed by the largest worldwide television audience in history, and I'm proud to say I saw that too. Buzz Aldrin on Coast to Coast. Buzz, it is a delight having you on the program, sir. How are you?
I'm very fine here in the southern coast of France and Saint-Tropez. It's just beautiful here.
I had heard that you got the name Buzz because your sister couldn't pronounce brother when you were a kid. Is that true?
That's the way I understand it. That's the way they keep telling it to me, yeah.
And then you legally changed your name to Buzz, right?
That's correct. I guess maybe 20 years ago, probably. But it takes time to catch up to all you journalists.
Buzz, I've got to ask you, whenever you look up at a full moon, do you sometimes pinch yourself and say, I was there? I mean, what's the feeling like?
Well, I guess I coined the phrase afterward that before we went there, it was a stranger, but it's a friend now. That's kind of... it's manufactured after the fact, and that really doesn't mean a whole lot. It's not too habitable a spot either. It's going to be difficult for people to go and live there for a long period of time. And I understand all these technical things about it, but I guess I'm still enthused whenever I look up there and realize that, by golly, I have actually been to that place. Now, it's not as clear as it used to be. I have a little astigmatism. But, we all have to live with growing a little bit older and having a few aches and pains and popping a few more pills than maybe we used to. But it's really amazing that there's still 18 of us still alive of the 24 people who reached the moon in support of those 6 landings.
And all heroes. When you were on the moon with Neil, and you two were bouncing around there, I mean, it had to have been such an incredible feeling. You're looking at planet Earth. You're on the moon, desolate. I mean, what kind of a feeling was there, Buzz?
Well, you got one of the 2 words. I just put 2 words together that seem to describe the event to me: magnificent desolation. And Tom Hanks has used those words now in his latest 3D IMAX portrayal of the 6 missions that went to the moon, and what the guys did. And he put it in a perspective of young kids kind of asking a few questions and being asked questions and coming up with childlike answers. And then right near the end, one of those girls who was asked questions turns out to be the base commander of a rather extensive base on the moon. Now, that's, I think, really a wonderful setting for an outstanding portrayal of the achievements of getting there on the moon. I just feel that that's outstanding. I'm not sure that it reflects the reality of an expanding human base. My vote would be that we would have an expanding colony on the surface of Mars for a number of reasons. It's much more habitable there. The resources that are there at Mars are much more capable of supporting sustained human activities. It takes a long time to get to Mars, and you need to gradually build up. You can't bring everybody back on a return trip, so other people have to stay there. I just vote for a growing habitation on Mars, and I think we really have to commit to that before we start spending a lot of money directed toward specifically Mars. I think we're doing the absolute right thing now in setting our objectives, as Kennedy did back in 1961. Really, it was the first time he said we're going to go to the moon. That was May 25th. Yuri Gagarin had flown once around the Earth, and Alan Shepard had gone up and down, just 15 minutes in flight. So to look back on those historic times is really quite a privilege for all of us. 12 walked on the moon, and 9 of us are still alive. And I'm trying to bring those people together in Apollo Lunar Ambassador reunions.
Oh, that would be a great reunion. I've got to tell you, are you disappointed that we stopped going to the moon and the program just seemed to end?
Well, my participation in it ended. All three of us, Neil, Mike, and I, decided that being so privileged to be on that first landing that we just would forego the opportunity to stay in the crew rotation cycle, and we'd move on to other things. And we all did that so that other people could have their chance to get to the moon. Neil went into aeronautics at NASA headquarters. Mike worked for the State Department for a while. I had hoped that my return to the Air Force, the first astronaut to do so, would be as an assignment commandant of cadets at the Air Force Academy. That's kind of an assignment that would allow me to ease back into the service after being away for 11 years out of 20 years. But that wasn't to be. They asked me to command the test pilot school, which was unusual because not only had I been away from the service for a good while, but I'd never had any test pilot training. I eased my way into the astronaut program by the academic achievements at MIT.
Buzz, I was reading in a documentary that you're going to be in that it was pretty touch and go trying to take off from the surface of the moon. There was some kind of broken circuit breaker, and you had to use a pen in order to really punch it and ignite the LEM. Is that what happened?
Well, we have rows and rows of circuit breakers, and we use them to protect a circuit from being electrified early when it wasn't really needed. So we sort of have a double protection. Most aircraft do that. If we're not using something, let's say you're flying cross-country in a fighter airplane and you're not going to be using the guns or rockets, you pull the circuit breakers on that so that just in case, something might jam or might fire if you happen to have ammunition aboard. So a lot of circuit breakers were pulled, and evidently when Neil and I got back in again and then sort of moving around to take those backpacks off in confined quarters so that we could depressurize again and toss those overboard to save weight for liftoff. We really put all of those kind of things into the flight plan to give us that extra assurance that we'd have enough fuel to more than get in back into orbit. Evidently, in doing that, I had knocked up against some of the circuit breakers, because when we finally got ready to try and sleep, I chose the most likely spot, got my firsties in there, and that was to lie down on the floor. But as I got ready to do that, I noticed that amongst some of the lunar dust on the floor, on the edge, was a broken off circuit breaker.
Oh, no.
The top of it. So I thought, well, this might be the lighting circuit breaker or something else. But I looked up there, and it was the engine arm circuit breaker.
Oh, no.
So we reported that to Houston, and then those guys were up for the next 6 hours trying to figure out how to get around that circuit. If in some eventuality, when the time came to arm that circuit, that it didn't stay armed or something like that. So they finally concluded that instead of waiting until 5 minutes before liftoff to push it in, we'd do that about 2 or 3 hours after we got up, which is what we did. And of course, not wanting to maybe apply any metal to that, why I chose a pen that we were using that had a felt tip on it, so that it wouldn't
short out.
And when I pushed it in, of course, it stayed in, so I didn't have to act like the little Dutch boy and hold my finger
while you were leaving the moon.
Right.
Hey, I have been just always interested in extraterrestrial life, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I had heard that someone was saying that you had seen a UFO. NASA said don't say anything about it, and we might as well get it from the horse's mouth, Buzz. Did you see anything unusual up there?
Well, a guy by the name of Charles Berlitz wrote something about the Roswell incident, and to establish his credibility, he had a little table in the front of his book which attempted to take advantage of alleged observations of people, of unusual sightings. And he specifically referred to Anglia TV's reported this, that had been cited by somebody else, that Neil and I saw some green things, green creatures. Well, this kind of spoiled my credibility and a lot of other people. So I decided to take him to court and sue him because he was repeating phrases that were inaccurate, had not done the right kind of, we won the suit. And I, hopefully it would cause a few people to be a little bit more careful in how they try and treat trusted servants of our government and of our people to tell the truth. I just feel that it's a little irresponsible of people to, especially after so many years, to bring up subjects that have been explained rather thoroughly, especially in our case in debriefings. I happened to see some flashes at night trying to go to sleep, and it turned out that these are high velocity, very ultra high velocity Z particles. That I thought what I was seeing was particles penetrating the cabin when the lights were out.
Right.
But it turned out that wasn't the case. The next mission that went up there could see them with their eyes shut. which meant that they were impacting the fluid in the eyeballs themselves and making an impact on the retina of the eye.
So darn, you and Neil didn't see any spacecraft on the moon after all.
Any spacecraft? No, just ours. Just ours.
That's what I thought.
It was magnificent desolation.
Do you believe, I know Edgar Mitchell, I've talked to him on the program before, he believes that there is extraterrestrial life out there somewhere. Are you?
Well, I don't think that's so amazing when you consider the size of our galaxy, 100,000 light years across in diameter, and ours is but one of billions of other galaxies, and they're separated by at least 20, 50 times the diameter of our swirling Milky Way galaxy. Each one is separated by quite a distance. To talk about intergalactic travel, when we understand the laws of physics as enunciated by Einstein and verified by most everyone else credible, the speed of light is just not something that creatures the size of human beings inside of spacecraft that are housing them, the speed of light is just not going to be exceeded. It is a barrier that causes time to change.
Yeah.
It causes the mass of things to grow to essentially infinity, and it's just not going to be possible. But within the limits of perception, of identification, there certainly will be an understanding that habitable conditions exist throughout our galaxy and throughout the universe. And among all of those habitable conditions, maybe 1 in a million, maybe 1 in a billion, will have the conditions that will allow creatures to move around, exchange communication with each other, pick up pieces of wood or something and rub them together and cause fire, dig down into the soil or material and melt some of that stuff into wires and put those wires and metal and aluminum and all that stuff together and make a spacecraft and ignite it with a rocket and send it from one place to another. That's intelligence.
Yeah, sure
of course, it's intelligence to communicate with great artistic creations of renditions of art and of writings. So there's bound to be intelligence, but most rare among the habitable creatures out there. Now, that's just a guess on my part, but it's a guess I think that is pretty well substantiated. When I grew up, we did not have evidence that the sun was a nuclear reaction converting hydrogen into helium,
True.
and that was the source of the energy. We did not know that there were other galaxies beyond the stars that we could perceive.
And we're finding new planets now. We didn't even know that then, outside of this solar
yeah.
system.
I guess it's several hundred now that
Absolutely.
we've identified, but most of them are quite big from our deductions because of the motion of the parent star.
Buzz
gives us a clue.
We're running out of time, and I know you have to go. First of all, I want to thank you for your service to this country on behalf of everybody listening to this program. We just adore you and what you've done. And even though you're 76, if they asked you to go up again, would you do it?
Well, our present president in his first term during an election year proposed a plan called the Vision for Space Exploration that commits us to completing the space station and the remaining flights of the orbiter before we retire it, while at the same time we develop the spacecraft to be able to return to the moon and then go on to Mars and beyond. And that's a plan, and I think it's a very bold plan. Now, exactly how we implement that, there are a lot of details, and as people say, the devil is in the details.
You got it. Would you go, Buzz? Would you go?
How we're going to do it? Well, nobody's going to ask me to go at my age.
All right. Hey, Buzz, we're out of time. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you being on
very
Coast to Coast.
welcome.
We love you. Buzz Aldrin. He was on the moon a long time ago. I'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch your dial. A friend of mine used to do some work with NASA, and he was telling me this weekend, this is an incredible story, that during the big push to beat the Soviets to the moon, putting a man on the moon when the competition was very heated, we had a program, a very confidential program called Pilgrim. That's what it was called. The code name was Pioneer, but the real name of the program was called Pilgrim. And he said that in order to beat the Russians to the moon, the plan was to send a man to the moon, but he wasn't coming back. He'd probably live there a year or two, and then he'd pass on. He'd die on the moon, and they would drop ship, food and supplies to him on a regular basis. His job was merely to get on the moon and then just kind of stay there. And, he'd do a few little things getting ready for an eventual real manned mission there to the moon, but that was the plan. He apparently said that they had a volunteer. He did not know who the person was, but that this individual was prepared to go and stay on the moon and die on the moon and would have been the first man on the moon. Once the Soviets decided they weren't going to push for a man on the moon program, we backed off this Pilgrim program, which absolutely was amazing. In a moment, more amazing things with Richard C. Hoagland on Coast to Coast AM. Well, Richard C. Hoagland, you know who he is, former Space Science Museum curator, a former NASA consultant during the historic Apollo missions to the moon, was science advisor to Walter Cronkite and CBS News, and for the last 19 years, Richard has been leading an outside scientific team in a critically acclaimed independent analysis of possibly intelligently designed artifacts on Mars. In the last several years, he and his team's investigations have been quietly extended to include more than 30 years of previously hidden data from NASA, Soviet then, and Pentagon missions to the moon. I invite all of you to go to his website, enterprisemission.com, where he has posted some new data for us all to look at. He is our full guest now on Coast to Coast AM. Hello, Richard C. How are you?
Good morning, George.
Good to talk with you. Hey, what did you think of Buzz, 76-year-old Buzz Aldrin?
It was such a blast from the past. It's kind of one of those things where you remember where you were when certain very major historic events happened.
Yes.
Like we all remember where we were when we heard that John Kennedy was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I'm going to remember to my dying day where I was when Neil and Buzz landed on the moon, because I was, in California in the North American aviation plant, which had built the Apollo and the service modules, standing with Robert Heinlein looking out this incredible, huge hangar door out toward the Pacific Ocean at a crescent moon hanging over the Pacific, while I'm watching in a corner of this huge hangar a live picture from the moon by way of Australia and the Parkes radio antenna that we're going to talk about a bit later. And I can see them walking around while we're standing there looking out into the moonlight at the actual lunar surface 250,000 miles away. It's one of those things you never forget, and Buzz's half hour, all too brief, brought it all back.
You know what? And I think he's being as honest and forthright as he can about just about everything he talked about.
Oh, I think so too. And remember when I talk about this cover-up that we have now discovered, and we have absolutely incontrovertible evidence that the moon that we thought we knew is not the moon that we know. I really exempt the guys who went, because remember, they are following what they perceive to be, if they perceive them to be, and I'll get to that in a second, lawful orders. They're all military officers. If they are commanded by their commander-in-chief not to discuss what they saw, I'm not talking UFOs and stuff like that, right. I'm talking ruins, we can actually point to the charter, to the NASA charter, where on matters of national security, those decisions are taken away from NASA and the employees of NASA, and they are legally vested by virtue of the Constitution and the Supreme Court with a higher authority, which is the commander-in-chief and the Oval Office. As Truman said, the buck stops there. So, if you had really directly, pointedly asked him, a very blunt question. Buzz, were there other things on the moon that are not, natural? I would have been intrigued to hear how he would have answered or not answered. But the UFO thing, in my mind, particularly the stories about them seeing, big UFOs lined up on craters and all that, I think that has been the disinformation story for decades to prevent people from asking, well, what's really there? And what I have up on our website tonight is a sampling of some of the stunning official NASA photography showing absolutely astonishing things. Glass structures, ancient ruins built by somebody. And the only question that is before the House tonight is, and the location where Apollo 11 landed, in the Sea of Tranquility, was any of that stuff visible, or was it over the horizon, and they did not know what they landed amongst?
I don't know if you heard my intro to you while Tom was calling you, but
no.
All right, I'm going to tell you what it was. I was at an event this weekend, and a person who used to work with NASA, whom I trust, was telling me, and he said, please don't use my name. And I promised him I wouldn't. You know what that's like. And he said, we had a program back in 1962 called Pilgrim, that everybody called Pioneer, but the real name was Pilgrim, that was going to land a man on the moon. We would have been the first, but he wasn't coming back. And this, he said, was when we were really pushing with the Soviets and we were trying to beat them. And then once they backed off, we killed that program. But the whole plan was to get this guy on the moon. There was no way to get him back. We were going to drop ship food and supplies to him on a regular basis. And he was going to set up these big balloons that were insulated and had some kind of shielding. And that's what he was going to do. And they figured he'd be alive for about a year or two before he passed on.
Okay, I heard about this at about the same time frame shortly before I joined CBS, which was in 1968, so
okay.
It was many years after 1962, because Kennedy announced Apollo in May 25th, as Buzz very aptly remembered, of 1961. In a joint session, of the House and the Senate. I heard about this, but I heard it a little differently. That it was called the Pilgrim Project.
All right.
Okay. It was designed to send a Mercury capsule to the moon, which was the only spacecraft that we had at that time. But it would be a Mercury capsule modified to include a retro rocket and landing legs so that the astronaut could back down and land this thing on the lunar surface, kind of with beacons and looking through the periscope and all that. And the idea was that he would be resupplied from Earth with unmanned equipment, with, kind of automated cargo delivery.
Yes.
And until the technology was created to bring him back, that he would basically live off the land and off this material that we sent until the spacecraft equivalent to the lunar module with an ascent stage could be landed in his vicinity, and then he would hike over to it, get in, power it up, and come home.
So that could be the case then.
Well, this was called, now Martin Caidin, who was a very famous space writer, actually wrote about this in a serialized fictional novel in the Saturday Evening Post of the era. And this was eventually turned into a hardcover book, which I have somewhere in my voluminous library. And I heard in years later, when I, kind of got involved with NASA, that this had been a kind of a, we're thinking of this, but we're not really serious because the American people would never allow us to jeopardize a human life that way. So I don't know to this day whether it was a really bona fide leak of a real desperate 11th hour plan to scoop the Russians, or it was just one of those things, in the CIA and the intelligence agencies, they do all kinds of scenario playing. Well, NASA, of course, has done some of the same thing when the guy at the top says, give me all your ideas for how we can beat the Russians. And this may have been one of those wild, off-the-wall ideas. It actually has a lot of overtones of Bob Zubrin's plan to go to Mars.
Sure.
Where he talks about Mars Direct, where you basically launch your habitat, which contains power and food and water and oxygen and everything you need to live. You launch it to Mars first, you land it, you make sure it arrives safely and it's waiting for you, and then you send your human crews to rendezvous with it and then live off the supplies that you brought, on that first mission. Well, that's kind of like what the Pilgrim Project, as I understood, was supposed to be. It was never supposed to strand the guy forever. The idea was that you pick a volunteer who could basically live alone for a year or 2 or 3 or 5.
Well, hopefully he'd live longer than you could get back and get him out of there, right?
Well, but see, we've had people living in the Antarctic in incredible desolation, isolated for years, very similarly.
Yeah, that's
where
true.
they have bivouacked materials and stockpiled caches of stuff, and they had to live off supplies that had been previously, put in place. So the idea itself, other than the fact that it was the moon, and you had to invent the technology to go and get him, was not that outrageous given the politics of the time. And I was fascinated that you somehow got onto that and brought it up.
And gosh, I'd love to talk to the guy. Apparently he's still alive, the volunteer, the one person that was going to go.
That would be a show.
Wouldn't that be something?
If you could find him and he was for real, that would be a hell of a show.
I wonder who he could be.
Well, we have a vast Coast audience. Somewhere out there, someone knows someone who knows someone, George.
Hey, I wanted to get your reaction. Did you happen to hear Stephen Greer on Art's program this weekend?
Yes, I did.
What'd you think of that? Specifically his talk about SETI hearing signals. Look, we talked to Seth Shostak. Seth says, absolutely not. And then, the old Seth, come on, you're a disinformation agent, aren't you? Come on, tell me. And he said, George, I am not. We haven't heard any signals. The only thing we've ever heard was that wow signal. He said, look, trust me, if we thought we heard extraterrestrial signals, we would blast it all over the place. What did you think of Greer's discussion that he had a couple sources that said that said he had heard something and also that their signals were getting blocked? It was kind of fascinating. He talked about it on June 1st with me as well, so he reiterated it with Art. But what did you think?
Well, I was kind of puzzled for several reasons. One is that if you can't go public with the names of your source, if that's the only information you have, sources told me, and you can't...
Well, you say that sometimes.
Yeah, but we have images that back up what the sources are telling us.
All right, okay,
and some of them are right there on the web tonight for everybody to look at.
All right.
If you don't have other corroborating data, and you're making such an extraordinary claim, and you don't want to jeopardize the people who he keeps referring to high-level sources, well, SETI is a very small project. How many high-level sources can there be?
There's only one or two people who work there.
Exactly. So you're really putting those sources in danger, if only in their mind, if they don't want to go public in terms of embarrassment. So I couldn't quite understand Stephen, who I know quite well. I've had several dinners and gone to conferences, and we've talked over the years. I couldn't understand why, with Hellier in Canada, he would make this statement at a press conference and why he would reiterate it without adding any more to the story. And the thing that was most disappointing is he was unable to provide a band of signals, that they were around 1,400 megahertz, or he wasn't able to say what size antenna would be required. In other words, he simply took this information, apparently at face value, never asked any technical questions that would allow him to independently, not divulging his sources, but independently perhaps move to get confirmation from some other agencies or talented amateurs who have very sophisticated equipment, as Art pointed out last night. And Art was kind of blown away. I mean, he was politically dumbfounded, and I kept hearing him over and over again say, this is amazing, this is absolutely fantastic. And if it's true, of course it is, the question is it true? And from my information, I have no way of telling you one way or the other.
Well, okay, that's your way of saying no comment, I guess, huh?
It's not a no comment. I just gave you 5 minutes of comment. Bottom line is, we don't know. And until someone breaks cover and comes out and officially says, this is the signal, remember, I went through a very interesting experience with SETI signals with Art, many years ago, in terms of this potential signal found in Pegasus from an amateur in England, and got very involved and got very complicated, and there were lots of web postings, and it got extraordinarily Byzantine and almost, X-Files kind of stuff. But the bottom line is there was no ultimate corroboration that what we were seeing in various telescopes was in fact what had been claimed in England.
Well, I got into broadcasting because of my fascination with the unusual and ufology. I mean, and again, you know my history, but the Betty and Barney Hill story would just it thrilled me, and I wanted to unravel some of these things. And Richard, so I've been at this since 1971. 69, I went into broadcasting as a copy boy, 19 years old. And yet we are no closer to getting the answer of whether, other than our guesses and how we feel, of whether we are being visited or not. And, you know, here we are all these years later, you know, the same great people that we all admire and love, Stanton Friedman, and I think Greer has done a good job doing what he's trying to do. Nobody yet has come forward with the real hard definitive proof. I mean, everybody was talking about Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister of Canada, but, you know, only a few people pointed out, and on this program, that he really didn't even see anything or didn't even know anything. He got all his information from Philip Corso's Day After Roswell book. He read that book and said, I guess this was going on during my time period.
Well, not having talked to him directly, and I haven't listened to Paula's interview with him, I don't really understand the logic chain that moved him from, okay, I'm defense minister, and I'm looking at all this terrestrial stuff, and then one day, after I'm retired, I kind of look at something else and think, oh, that was going on. Why did he throw himself into the pond? Why did he jump in feet first into this very controversial subject where there is, as you said, very